So thank you all for coming, first of all. I thank every one of my readers and fans and friends and family. I put all of those in the acknowledgments of any book I write. Because I really, authors don't get a lot of support sometimes, and even when they do, it just doesn't seem enough, unless you're, Brad Thor or somebody like that. So New Year Gone was the original title of this book from many, many years ago. And so I wanted to just give a little story about how that came to be and how it came to be a cold New Year. So I guess we have to start back. I don't want to bore you by going all the way back to my childhood, but at some point in my childhood, I decided as an avid reader that I could write some of this stuff. I would like to write some of this stuff. This sounded exciting. And I wrote a lot of short stories and didn't get anywhere with them. But then about 1995, I had moved to Oskaloosa I'd been there a few years, and I started Taekwondo. And a few years after that, about 1995, the writing bug hit me again. And I thought, well, I'll write about what I know. I know Taekwondo. And I know Des Moines because I had traveled up to Des Moines a lot. And I had always enjoyed the wonderful women who were in Taekwondo. So I changed the Sam Peterson character to Mallory Peterson. And jumping ahead then to 2000, I joined a critique group. I found a critique group up here in Des Moines that I still attend. Took a little break for a while, but came back. Only because I was out of range of Des Moines for a while. But I had written the first Mallory Peterson story and discovered right away after the first chapter that I had written 40,000 words of crap because I didn't know how to write. So skip ahead. I had written a few other books in the meantime, or a couple of other books in the meantime. The second in the Mallory Peterson story, since the first one seemed to have died, and the second one hit me, and I thought, well, I'll just start writing that. And I had written another one, Night Shadows, that sort of just fell into place, and I really liked that, and I tweaked it a while. Then in 2009, I met a publisher, and she accepted both Beta, which was the second in the Mallory Peterson story series, and Night Shadows, and they were both published as ebooks only. I had also met a publisher at a conference, and after Beta was published, I thought, well, I think I can resurrect Alpha. I mean, the story's still good, the character's already existing. So I basically rewrote the entire book from page one, and approached this acquisition editor who I had met, and I said, look, we know each other, we're friends, we've talked to each other a lot of times. If you want me to go through the regular submission process, I will do so. Otherwise, I can just give this to you right now. And she says, what took you so long? So I turned that in. So in 2010, Alpha was published. Skipping ahead to about 2014, both of those books went off, all three of those books went off the market because both publishers died. And the publishing houses closed. And there was big mess ups because they were small publishers and nobody wanted to take care of them, of the authors after that. A couple of years later, I met another couple of people who helped, who wanted to publish my books. They were starting a new publishing company. And so I jumped in with them and had new titles, or not new titles, but new covers for the first 3 in the Mallory Peterson series. And we were looking at a couple of, they were editing the 4th and 5th and getting ready to maybe put those out. And I was considering, sending them, having them publish those too. However, I was not feeling very comfortable with them. So I had written this New Year Gone. What I wanted was, I was between projects, and I wanted to write something completely different than Mallory Peterson. And I thought, we'll just go totally opposite of the fun-loving, high-kicking, action-packed female protagonist. I had always been a big fan of Ross MacDonald's Lou Archer. And if you've ever read him, he writes stories that need a scorecard because they're complex and complicated and intricate, because A connects to B, connects to C, connects to F, who connects back to A somehow, and you never know until you read how it all connects. And I thought, those are fascinating, and somehow I was able to keep up with them. And I thought, well, I want to write something like that. I want to write in the vein of Ross MacDonald. So I created a character, as Jennifer mentioned, called John Habeck. And he was smoking, drinking, world-weary, rotary dial phone, 1970s piece of crap car. And then I added a little bit of a complication for him, that his ex-wife is also his secretary and landlord and financial advisor. So I created this whole story about a missing 19-year-old who disappears on New Year's Eve. And then when I got into it, I kept adding characters, and making that complicated and connection, A to B to C to D. And I added even another side story in there, where a shopkeeper approaches John and says, hey, I've got a troubled nephew who's into drugs. Can you help him out? And so there's the subplot or the side plot. However, it connects to characters who are also involved with the first case. So I got to reading, I finished the manuscript, went to the critique group that I had discovered in 2009 down in Knoxville, the Marion County Writers Workshop, and Mike and Joanne are part of that. And immediately, when I started reading the book, I don't know how far I got into it before Mike says, John is really a kind of a plain name. You shouldn't use that. It's kind of a boring name. And then he backed off and said, oh, well, I mean, if you want to use it, it's your story. So I sent out a query to different friends and said, what do you think this guy should be named? And one of my friends who from Oskaloosa mentioned Sebastian. And so I changed Sebastian. I looked up, there's various spellings of Sebastian. I spelled it with all A's, just to be a little bit different. And I thought, well, and somehow after I wrote it, it seemed to fit. And so we got that done and did some editing. So now I didn't know what to do with it. What do? You start querying and you start sending it out. Well, I found a publisher out of Texas who accepted the book. She called me up. She called me on the phone, and I've never had a publisher call me and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know I would like to publish your book. I said, okay, great. So now I'm thinking, this is, what is it, 2020 is when this was. And I said, okay. And thought, well, it'll be a couple years before it actually sees print. And she says, no, we'll have it in about 5-6 months. We'll have it out in about 5-6 months. Okay. Well, that spring, later that spring, or was it that spring? Yeah, maybe that spring. I contacted her and I talked to her about the fourth and the fifth in this Mallory Peterson series. Because by that time, I really wasn't comfortable with the previous publisher. And she said, send them to me. And they were put out in short order. Well, about May of 2021, actually end of May, early June, I get an email that is in my spam folder. But it looked interesting because the woman asked me if I was an author with this publisher. And I thought, well, that's a little strange. And so I thought, well, maybe it's not spam, maybe it's not junk. So I answered her. She wrote back and she says, oh, did you know Evelyn died? When did she die? Early May. And nobody was informed. No author was informed. And because, once again, the family didn't want anything to do with the publishing house after that. And so it took a long time for legalities to get around and for somebody to get on the stick and get us an official notice that our rights had been returned, because we didn't know. Nobody knew. Because by that time, so I went from about 7 books, down to 0, because the previous publisher had closed. The publisher who published the first 3 in the series had closed because of health reasons.
Like death, you mean?
Well, not necessarily death, but it was actually COVID related. That everybody that they used was ill and couldn't work anymore. So they closed. So I went from 7 books to 0 and had to start all over again, which I took. I was disappointed for a while, but it gave me a chance to dig into the books a little bit deeper and get some real solid editing done, and then start over again. So Alpha was accepted by a publisher in 2022, and then later in the spring of 22, I met a publisher out of Branson, Missouri. I had gone down to a conference, the Ozark Writers League conference. Heard about that and thought, it's a one-day conference. It's relatively inexpensive, unlike some of the others who were getting a little pricey. And thought, okay, it's 6 hours, but we'll go for it. And at that time, they had a publisher down there who was accepting pitches. And I just handed her to New Year Gone and said, here you go. And she said, okay. And she came back and she said, we'll take this. So then the fun started, quote unquote fun. We signed the contract, and I didn't realize at the time that she was an editor. Now, as authors, you may know that there are several different types of editors: developmental, copy, line. This woman is all of them. And so those of you who have received edits back on manuscripts, you know that if you have a Word document, you get paragraphs and sentences and sections highlighted with little comments off to the side. I received the first round of edits back from this publisher, and 90% of the book was highlighted. I spent several minutes yelling at the ceiling and going, you really hated all of this, didn't you? You didn't like any of it. And she says, no, we just liked it. We liked it. We want to strengthen up the character a little bit. And I was reminded of the little cartoon that I saw in the New Yorker one time with this editor and this author, and the editor says, we like everything, we just want to change every word. So that's pretty much what I did. We rearranged chapters, we combined chapters, we added new information, new material. So there are a few other scenes in there to strengthen up, especially Sebastian's ex-wife, because she pops in like 2 or 3 times during the book, and the publisher said she's really kind of a throwaway character, even though she's really important. You have to make her important. So went around and did that. So at about the same time that Alpha was published, I was once again I was in around 21, 22. I was in the midst of trying to decide what next project I wanted to work on. And back in 2012, 2013, the Marion County Writers Workshop had this grand idea of collaborating on a book. Let's all of us make a book, write a book. And we spent about 6-8 months, and the project sort of fell apart because there was a lot of voices, a lot of great writers. I appreciate and commend every effort of those writers. And we put together one heck of a story. And it just didn't have coalescence. It just didn't come together. So it sat for a long time, and I finally received all of the material. I had some of it online on my computer, and so I found this folder that'd been gathering dust on a bookshelf, and I opened it up and I read through everything that we had done, and I thought, this is something that can be done, and this is a good story, and I think I can make something of this. So I started from page 1 and all the way through and wrote a lot of additional material, finished out the scenes that we didn't have. One of the problems we had was a timeline, and that continued to be a major issue for a while, and then brought it back to the group, and they went, "Oh, great, let's put this out." And so I finished it and went through several rounds of editing, and finally it got published as the Peachtree Mystery. So one of the things about the Peachtree Mystery that I really enjoyed was there's a little bit of humor in it. There's a little bit of there's a gangster. There's a little bit of an adventure, Indian adventure around Lake Red Rock. But when the group was originally writing it, we had written a scene, kind of a spicy scene with the bad guy and one of the protagonist's ex-girlfriend, where they are enjoying the morning after a night in the motel, and the gangster's all upset. And so after we got done reading that scene, one of the members said, "Look, I don't mind that we during this project, and if you guys want to go ahead and do it, that's fine, but I've got some church people who might read this, and they're not going to enjoy the language, and I don't want to be associated with that." And so we said, okay. So we didn't put the bad language in. So that was one of my challenges, was how to have a gangster, a murder, a death, and 2 bumbling brothers who sell meth and weed, and not have any foul language in there, not have any vulgarity in there. How do you do that? So there's a lot of mild insults that go around, but there's no vulgarity in it. So I think that's really an interesting thing. That is not necessarily family oriented, but nobody's going to get offended in that way. So
it won't be banned.
It won't be banned. True. So come up to this year, and it's been now almost 3 years now since this publisher's had this book, A Cold New Year, this New Year Gone. We played around with different titles, and we finalized a Cold New Year. We had a cover already back in the spring. We had everything ready to go, and just there's delays and delays and delays. And finally, I thought, well, enough is enough. Technically, I could have canceled the contract. We'd gone past the time limit, and long about July, August, I thought I'll wait till the October conference, the fall conference, and then I'll have to really, nail her on it. About July or August, she comes back and says, "Okay, we're ready to publish. Be out October 28th." Okay. Well, by that time, by end of July, it was good news, bad news. The good news was that she was finally going to put this book out. The bad news was the new publisher of Alpha gave me my rights back. And I thought, oh, okay. Just out of the blue, up and out of the blue. She says, "We're just giving your rights back." Well, then 2 weeks later, I realized that everybody at the company got their rights back because they were closing. I don't know why. They claimed low sales, but who knows? I'm just glad she didn't die. So I turned around to the Cold New Year publisher, Ozark Hollow Press, and I said, "Look, you wanted the Mallory Peterson series when we first talked. Would you like it now?" And I sent her the 5 manuscripts that have been out, that have been published previously. And we went through we decided on a staggered contract signing. So I signed the first one for Alpha. I just signed here about a week or two ago for Beta. And so through next August, I'm scheduled for contract signings that'll just be around a round robin. She'll get done with one, they'll start on the next, they'll start on the next, and then they'll start on the next. And here, last week, I asked her, I said, "You want the next one? Because I'm done with the 6th. And she says, "Yeah, send it in." I said, "Do you want to review it?" She says, "Unless you've made any radical changes, no." So I sent it in, and she's added it to the schedule for next November's contract signing. So I'll have 6 coming out, and I'm working on the 7th and reading the 8th to the critique groups, and with a 9th in waiting, in the wings. So
are you going to do a sequel?
So that was one of the questions that she came up with was, "Hey, we really like series," and I had planned on a series with Sabastian Habeck. I had ideas and titles out there, but I told her, I said, to write this book, I had to get into a different mindset.
You got grumpy. Just say
No, I didn't get grumpy.
That explains it.
No. I had to really get into a different mindset because I had to get into Sabastian Habeck's head, and it's a little different than Mallory Peterson, because Mallory Peterson is me as a female, only she's better looking and a better taekwondo person. But we have the same likes and dislikes, and she's left-handed and I'm left-handed. Sebastian Habeck is totally opposite. So
I thought he was you.
Oh,
I seriously did.
when have you ever seen me smoke?
No, I don't mean that part. Just his personality.
Yeah, there's a little bit of cynical humor. I did put a little bit of my cynicism in it. So to do that, again, I would have to come up with a very complicated, complex outline.
I'll help you.
Yeah, and I've started actually on with ideas. I've tinkered around with ideas for the second one, and then the third one would be a little bit deeper relationship between his wife, with his ex-wife. But I haven't gotten anything written on that, and so, like I said, but she was okay with that, and I think she's really, really happy with the Mallory Peterson series. And she said, well, how many do you have out? Or how many can you give me? I said, well, I've got up to 8. Up to 8. Well, what about after that? We haven't even gotten the first one out yet. And you're talking about 9 and 10 and more? And I thought, okay. So I said, well, I sort of have an idea for the 9th, but, or the 10th or whatever it is. And we'll work on it. We got time on that. So, but Cold New Year, that's what we decided on. And I like the cover that she came up with. We did a little tweaking on it. And I even found, when I was looking for pictures for the business card, I found that picture that she had used. And I thought, well, that's it. She just zoomed in on it a little bit, because it's the original is a long distance shot on it. So it is out, and I have a new marketing person that is going to be helping with it and Night Shadows, and we'll see where it goes. So
I'll bring you ideas to our meetings.
So I didn't use any of my notes because I think I remembered everything. So.
Any questions?
I loved the book. I thought it was great. And I really could see how it could grow into a series. I love the wife, too. I mean, she's an integral part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think even though they are divorced, he still needs him, and he still needs her. I think he would spend all his time in a bar and wind up dead in a ditch somewhere, because he'd drink himself to death. If he didn't have her nearby to keep pushing him and keep encouraging him and supporting him, even in her little snippy way that she does. And that's kind of the way I wanted the book. I started with her really, even though she cares about the missing woman, because it's her niece who's missing, she still kind of jumps on his back every now and then. And by the end of the book, she's softened up. And I wanted that, and I think I wanted to do that if I was for the second and third. I wanted to do that again. Start out really tough and then soften up near the end too.
The young man that you have, Sebastian, mentor or take under his wing, he could possibly be in the next book too.
Could be.
Or his aunt.
Or his aunt. Yeah.
The aunt. Yeah, the shopkeeper. The aunt is the shopkeeper, right around the one who hires him to see about it. Her nephew is the shopkeeper. She's just a frumpy old middle-aged woman, kind of nondescript. And she's been at her job for many, many years, and they've sort of got a routine that he goes down for lunch most days, grabs a couple sandwiches, a couple packs of cigarettes, a cup of coffee, and that's their relationship. So could have something like that. The next one I had planned was if we're doing a cold New Year, I wanted to do a cold spring, and set in March, April, and he is suffering from a cold while it's raining, and it just rains. And the cold.
So cheerful.
Yes. A cold spring would be, I had envisioned it being a piece of a painting that gets stolen from this wealthy family. And they hire him to find it, since the police don't seem to be they want to keep it quiet as much as they can. And I've gotten different ideas on where I want to go with it. So I'm just starting to write down characters and possible ideas.
Is the ex's family, her family, wealthy?
Fairly, yes.
Okay, that helps. I have a really good idea for you.
Yes. So Anne Lansing is she grew up in a family that was very they gave her a lot of, the family was very pressured to succeed. The parents really pushed their kids to succeed, do the best, be the best. Well, they grew up and their three children have felt that pressure. And one of them is out in California. Well, one of the brother is out in California with his kids, and Arlene is in town, and she's married to Roger, who is part of this city council, city planning, helps with that, city development, and they're both all pressured. She works in real estate, the best real estate, the best realtor, and the kids are suffering. The kid in college, he's going to have high blood pressure by the time he's 25, because but he can't, because he knows he's a failure. He knows he can't live up to the standards, but he tries. Whereas Annabelle Lansing, the one who goes missing, she just doesn't care anymore. She rejected the family drive years and years ago. Well, now she's sort of out there not knowing what to do.
So, Stephen, can you talk a little bit about your writing process?
Oh, wow. Let's see, we got another.
Plotter,
Oh.
outliner,
I
seat of your pants.
Yeah. So I've heard about plotting and pantsing, and I'm sorry, I don't see how anybody can pants. I know I've heard, we have some in our group that say, yep, I can do it all the time. I don't see how you can do it. It's like walking through a cave with a match and trying to find your way. I can't do that. I have to have an outline. However, it starts with an idea, and I go, oh, I think, well, I would try this. That's kind of an interesting idea. And then I don't do anything with it. I'll just let it sit. If it comes back and bugs me, then I think, okay, let's write some things down. Let's write some characters down. Let's see if I can come up with some scenes. Let's get that outline done, and I'll tinker with the outline. I'm not a detailed outliner. I remember attending a book talk with Jeffrey Deaver, and he writes a 150-page outline. And basically, all I have to do is go back and fill in the words. He writes everything. I thought, I can't do that. I do write an outline, but it's fluid, so that when I get into the actual writing of the scenes, then the outline can change if I find problems, or if I forgot about this. I need to, wouldn't this be a great idea? Oh, let's put this down. Let's do this down. So we get we have that outline, and I normally follow the outline for the most part. And then once I get it done, then I will go back and reread each chapter, usually before I take it to the critique groups, just to polish it up so I'm not stumbling over misspelled words or punctuation or things like that. I want to try to have I'm not necessarily editing it. However, the first edit really comes because I write longhand. And I've just found that easier to write a story in longhand. I can think faster than I can write, so I'm always thinking ahead. Whereas if I would sit at the word processor and try to type it in, I can type faster than I think, which means I'm having to stop and think about the next sentence. Stop and have to, then type the next sentence in. So I do that. So the first edit really is typing it in from the longhand version of that. So then I'll take it to the critique groups and read that and see how long it takes to get through it. And I write notes, and then I put those notes aside. I don't go back and immediately change that chapter. And I don't know if I have, it's a rare occasion. that I've ever brought a chapter back and said, let me try this again and read it to you. Because if you keep doing that and you keep doing that and you keep doing that, if you get a critique, you give me a critique and I go home and change it. And then I come back and I write it and you give me a critique and I go back and change it and I come back and read it and you're never going to hear chapter 2. And it doesn't matter what you say, because if I'm trying to satisfy everybody, I'm never going to satisfy anybody. Because once you give me a critique here, that's going to affect chapter 34 down the way. So I save all of the notes. I don't really change anything throughout the story once I have it done. I save all of the notes. And I've trained myself that now when I get done with the notes, I have this big stack of critique notes and corrections. And then I start with chapter 1 and I read through it. And I've trained myself to go, oh yeah, I remember when he said that about that section, that sentence. And then I go back and then I determine whether your critique was worth changing. Because, you could go, oh, you give me some really great stuff. Oh, I'm going to change that. And then you could give me stuff and say, oh, that's really great. I could change that. Well, when I get back into it, I'm going, I don't think so. For various reasons. Not saying the critique was bad or wrong. But when it comes right down to it, it's my story. And I have to write the best story I can try to write. And so I'm hoping if there's something egregiously wrong, where 3 or 4 people tell me this doesn't work for me, then I'm gonna have to really go back and change it and think about how to change it. But if it's something that I like and it works for me, then I'll keep it. So when I get it done with all the changes, edits, that first round, I will throw it into a writing software. I've discovered a writing software, Pro Writing Aid. We talked about it in various groups, and it is AI, but it's not going to write my story. I throw scenes in there, and what it does is it'll go, you have a passive voice here. You have bad punctuation here. It'll fix the grammar, fix the punctuation. It will suggest different things for me if I wanted to get rid of the passive voice. One of the great things I like about it is it gives me echoes. They call it echoes. And that means I've repeated the same word several times in 2 paragraphs. So she backed her car down the way and backed all the way up and went back to the store. Okay, I've done that, and it really bothers me, and I'm trying to train myself not to do that as much anymore. So once I get that done, I go through that. Then I'll read it through one more time, and then I'll really concentrate on any little thing that I don't like. And by reading it, actually, let me back up a little bit. After that Pro Writing Aid is done, I'll put it in a drawer for a while and then go work on something else and give it a rest, give it a break. And then when I come back, I can reread that manuscript one more time and get with fresh eyes, a fresh mindset, and see if I've named a character 2 different names, which I have twice in the same story. Whether I have, because now I'll read it all the way through, and in a faster time, and that way I'm not reading it over a year, or I'm going to forget what I did in chapter 4 by the time I get to chapter 34. So, and I may read it again. It depends on how comfortable I am. And then I'll submit it, and then go through rounds and rounds of editing when the publisher gets it. And anybody who's been published knows that's what happens.
Right. Well, thank you so
Steve,
much.
a
Oh,
quick question here. You wrote New Year's Gone. And I mean, New Year's Gone. Wait a minute. That was the first book, right?
That was the first, the original title of that.
New Year's Gone.
Yeah.
And then, you know, all kinds of avalanches and volcanoes happened. And it kind of disappeared. And you said, well, I got to bring it out again. You found someone who could do this for you. And he brought it out with a new title. What I would like to know is what sort of revelations occurred to you between, first of all, how many years between those? And then what are the revelations that occurred to you with Sebastian, with the plot? In other words, how did this book evolve as you sat on this for a long time? When you finally came to the time, well, I got to bring out Cold New Year, and you got an opportunity to rewrite this because you thought about it a long time. I want to know what you did to make Cold New Year that is different than New Year's Gone.
So I think it was 2020 that the outfit out of Texas accepted the manuscript, accepted New Year Gone. And we really didn't do any editing on that other than proof edits. I think they sent it back 3 times and went, find another mistake, find another mistake, find another mistake. There really wasn't any other editing done to it. She just liked the way as is, and we went from there. We played around with the covers and settled on one. From 2021, when I get my rights back, I'm throwing it into Pro Writing Aid and fixing a lot of the errors that were still there. When Ozark Hollow Press picks it up and she sends back these massive amounts of edits, after screaming at the ceiling for 10 minutes, I talked to her, and we talked, and we talked, and we emailed, and she and her team sent back suggestions, and they were suggestions. I could have told her, no, I want it printed as is, and she would have done it. She wouldn't have liked it. It probably wouldn't have been as strong, but that was my choice. She was just the editor at that point.
So that's what you did?
No. No, after I talked with her, I settled down and really got to looking at those edits that she suggested and why she suggested them. So one of the things that we talked about was that Anne, the ex-wife, needed to be stronger. And I said, yeah, I can see that, and I want to make her stronger because she's a good character. With the revelations about Sebastian is a little bit of his mindset and why he does what he does and how he does what he does. And one of the major, gosh, I hate to spoil this. I don't want to spoil it. One of the major issues was what happens to Annabelle. Because I had an original ending for Annabelle. And the publisher came back and went, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that.
So your new manuscript is revolving around the editor's decisions.
A lot of it, yes.
And how about, I want to ask about yourself, though. What did you see in the manuscript in those years? You said, oh, this is amazing. I see something different here.
I saw more of the story I could put in. Okay. There are extra scenes in there, and that made me think deeper about the characters. Yes, based on her suggestions. But then I thought, well, yeah, that's a valid point. She's got valid points here. Now, I didn't accept all of them.
Yeah.
There were some I went, no, I want this in here. No, this I'm not going to change the language because you think it's offensive or you think it's not proper. This is the way I want this character to talk. And we haggled on words sometimes, and I went, no, that's the right word. He sometimes uses high-minded words, and I want him to use that. So, but I did get a little bit a deeper sense of who he is and what he does. And when I thought about it, that major change at the end, I really thought about that. That was the toughest of all the 90% of the edits, 90% of the manuscript of all I had to change. That was the trickiest. That was the most challenging, because I had to really, really think about that before I did anything. And it was a while before I actually made the change. And I made it, but I made it in the bittersweet way it had to be. And she came back and she says, "Oh yeah, I like that a lot better."
So you also like Cold New Year better than New Year Gone?
In some ways, yes. Some ways, no. I mean, I enjoyed the first manuscript. I wish I had some of the changes from this one in the last one. I understood why she had me do a few changes. I didn't necessarily agree with them, but I thought, okay, I'll go with a little bit of what she says and change things. There were a few changes, no, I didn't like, but I made anyway.
So you feel like Cold New Year is clearly an improvement over years ago?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah,
Very good.
it is. A whole lot better.
Right. Well, thank you very much for sharing all of that information. And Steve will be here to sign books if you are interested.
Thank you.
Thank you.